Good afternoon. Show of hands, how many of you think the benefits of early childhood education far exceed the cost of the investment, and we're underestimating in early childhood education in this country? Right, you're the wrong audience. It may seem a little strange having a banker come and talk to you about the value of early childhood education, but please understand that this is very much an economic issue, and it's actually at the heart of having a prosperous and successful economy and society. A few years back, I was actually asked if I would do a research paper on the state of literacy and numeracy in Canada. Now, I couldn't believe we could actually have a problem, because we have a modern knowledge-based economy, we have a well-developed primary and secondary school system, right? How could we possibly have a problem on something so basic as literacy and numeracy? Well, the international statistics proved enormously shocking to me to find that close to 5 in 10 Canadian adults don't have the desired level of literacy to succeed in a modern knowledge-based economy, and close to 6 in 10 don't have the desired level of numeracy. I remember, we have an awareness problem in the country about this state of affairs, because like myself, when I went into doing research in this area, most Canadians can't believe we have a problem here. I remember doing a TV interview on this after I, did my report, and I was doing the interview, and I said to the reporter, I actually have people, in my family that don't meet the desired criterion, right? But if you ever told them that they had a problem, they'd get really upset with you. I got off the program, and the phone rings immediately, and it's my mother-in-law who says, "Who?" Right? And the reality is that the most recent data suggests that we aren't actually seeing any improvement, even though we're doing increased investment in the space. And I was terribly depressed by the more recent PISA numbers on numeracy and math skills of our youth that actually showed a deterioration. So, why do I care about essential skills development? Well, from an economist point of view, the way I would look at it is just, it increases the odds of being employed, it reduces unemployment. If you experience unemployment, the duration of unemployment is cut if you have stronger essential skills. It increases the range of occupations you can fill, it lifts lifetime earnings, it helps you do training, it raises your standard of living. In actual fact, I think it's the great enabler, right? It's what you build everything else on. So a very fundamental question is, okay, if we're not doing well, where do we invest to change things? Well, I do a lot of financial planning presentations around this time of year, being RSP season. And I actually don't have a problem conveying to investors the value of compounding interest and compounding returns, right? Well, the message here is you invest early. And the more you invest early, the better the return you're going to get on your investment. It works the same way with education. Right? If you invest earlier, you're going to get a big payoff. And there's benefits, when we think about early childhood education, people will immediately leap to, the benefits to the child, but let's understand there's also benefits to the economy, society, and parents as well. So it has a broad base effect. And there's been a lot of research done, and you heard about it today, and from experts, which I am not, that an awful lot of child development happens, or an awful lot of personal development happens at an early stage in life. One of the statistics I found most interesting when I was going through the literature on this subject was the fact that more and more we believe the environment shapes your skill sets. It's not driven by pure genetics, right? And the outcomes can be altered by intervention at an early stage. And it's much easier to develop early than try to fix later in life. So it leads to better outcomes. And I'm not, unfortunately, when I was told I was going to speak for 10 minutes, I said, I don't want slides. I don't like slides. It distracts the audience from what you're saying. And they said, no, we want exhibits. We want charts, right? And the problem is you put charts in, and I think it makes the presentation longer. So I'm going to be very brief on a lot of the slides. So what we can see is kids that have gone through effective early childhood programs have lower grade retentions. They are, there's less need for special education. It lowers high school dropout rates. participants in the programs, now you always got to be careful about correlation and causation, but the correlation here is kids that have been through these programs tend to make better life decisions. From a society point of view, you say, okay, so who in society is the most vulnerable population, right? And the answer is kids from lower income backgrounds, but there's a caveat to this, and that is you don't want your early childhood education programs to be just filled with kids from low income families, because the literature actually shows that doesn't actually end up with optimal outcomes. You actually want diverse sets of kids in the classrooms. But if you had to say, you know, who are the people that are most vulnerable, the obvious answer is low income kids. And since we're having an increased dialogue around income inequality and outcomes along those lines, this discussion actually fits into that theme as well. The impact on the economy, you know, there is a wide array, right? One of the most obvious ones is it increases female labor participation. Now, the gap between male and female labor participation has closed enormously over the years. And I've had a big, long debate with my former boss, Don Drummond, about how much more that could close. But if you look at the female participation with kids less than 6 years old, what you'll find is there is still scope there that you could have some narrowing. But it goes way beyond that, right? We as a country need the most skilled labor force we can possibly produce. The population's aging, the labor force is slowing. This is going to lead to labor shortages, right? Almost all the jobs out there are going to be for post-secondary education graduates. And the economy is constantly changing. The speed at which things happen is incredible, and this means you need to constantly upgrade your skills. You don't go to school and then stop and go work. You go work and continue to learn as you go. And workers have to be adaptable. They have to be able to change careers, right? And from an economy point of view, if we try to compete with places like China on labor costs, we will lose. So how are you going to win? The answer is you have to go up the scale in producing more sophisticated products, but that means you need more sophisticated labor. And if we look at Canada, one of our biggest economic challenges is enormously poor productivity growth. Now, it's a conundrum to economists as to why our productivity growth is as bad as it actually is. We don't have a good answer for what's caused it, but like a good murder mystery, we have a bunch of good suspects, right? And we're underinvesting in capital is one example, but the flip side, the reciprocal of that is we're more reliant on labor, right? And that means we need the labor that has the skills to drive the economy. And there are big benefits to parents. You know, probably the one that is the most understated is the impact that early childhood education can provide in reducing stress on parents and all the knock-on effects from that. So, and then from a society point of view, you know, we spend a lot of money dealing with consequences of people trapped in low income and not being successful. And you know, there was a study done that looked at what's the cost for every high school dropout, right? Well, if we can lower the dropout rate, we can take that money and actually use it for other things, which is actually going to be a more effective and a better outcome for our economy and society. Now, you're having a presentation from an economist, so you didn't expect that basically we're going to get down to dollars and cents. And you know, in today's very fiscally restrained world, when you go to a policymaker and say, you know, I've got this cause that I want you to support, you know, and you go in and you make a passionate case that, you know, they should invest in your area. Understand there's 100 people behind you that's going to come in the office immediately after and say, I've got an equally, if not more important cause for you to invest in. So I think from a advocacy point of view, it is really important to have numbers behind, you know, what's the return on the investment? If you have $1 and you spend it, where are you going to get the best return? So my team did an evaluation. We went through all the different literature that had been written on this subject, and it's amazing. Like out of 60 studies, there was only one I came across where there was a case of a negative return assessment. And that one study, when you dug below the surface, what it told you was it was the quality of the program. The other 59 said that the benefits far outweigh the costs. And in terms of giving you a range on this, the benefit cost ratio was anywhere from every dollar you invest, you get $1.50 all the way up to almost $3. That's a massive return. The one thing I would caution for any of you that are doing advocacy is don't oversell your case, because it will actually undermine you. Right? So when we looked at these studies, we tried to understand how they were done. Was the numbers done in a unbiased manner that was the data handled responsibly? And so, there's a lot of things that go into those numbers, right? Costs can overrun what your planned costs are. The benefits are often very hard to quantify. So, we're taking hard numbers here, but at the same time, this is a little loosey-goosey. So when I looked at it, I'm much more comfortable with the $1.50 return versus $1. But I think a lot of people, immediately go to the $3 return because, hey, that makes my case better. Understand, a 50% return on your investment, how would you like that in your portfolio? 50% is a great return, right? You don't have to go all the way to 300% to actually, make your case. Right? So the bottom line, the thing I want to stress though, is all of the studies tell you the same thing. High quality early childhood education carries enormous benefits relative to the costs that are going to be, that are going to go into the outcome. And when we think about the country, I really do think that there's an inequality dimension to this. Like, how many of you believe that we should have universal primary school in Canada? Right? Virtually all Canadians would agree on this. So why do we think we should leave parents to fend for themselves with kids up to age 4 or 5? Right? Like, if you use the logic and you just work backwards and say, should access to education, which again, I think education is the great enabler, right? Should that be universal? If you think the answer is yes, then you have to ask yourself why, why did the system, why is the system starting when it's starting? So the bottom line is, I think increased investment in this area would be enormously impactful. And when I look at Canada, I look at public expenditure on early childhood education as a share of the economy. And we look at this as a comparison between other English-speaking countries and Western European countries. And we compare them to Canada. Canada ranks dead last. There isn't actually that many other areas that you can find Canada ranks dead last. Right? So it is very clear, and actually just to emphasize this point, this includes Quebec. Right? So if you move outside of the Quebec area where you have a program in place, the Canadian numbers even look worse. So what would it take to get Canada to the average of OECD nations? Not above it. Let's just be average. Well, the answer is it would cost about $3 to $4 billion. And then the question is, okay, so now we have governments in Canada that are working against binding fiscal constraints. Right? The federal government probably will balance its budget in 2015, if not 2014. I personally think it's going to be 2014. But the provinces, many of the provinces like Ontario actually face much tougher fiscal challenges. And from an advocacy point of view, I think that the message here is we need to drive home the point, the value of investment in this space. But when you're talking to the government, you also have to be pragmatic in terms of understanding what the fiscal constraints are going to be. But in terms of making the case, what you really need to do is make the case that there's a more efficient way of using the resources we have, and from a point of view of, as budgets are being balanced and governments are looking at reforming their spending, they should be thinking about where are they going to get the biggest bang for their buck. And in my opinion, early childhood education is one of those areas where it would have a very large long-term impact. I often get pushed back about, should you spend $3 or $4 billion on early childhood education, or should you spend it on skills development for for workers today to deal with shortages today? And the answer is yes, right? You have to do both, right? Businesses are going to need workers today, but we're also going to need the workers of the future. And you need to be able to balance that if you're going to be successful in the long run, particularly if we were going to overcome a lot of the other challenges that we have to face. So I'll stop there, and I'll look forward to any questions.